Hello, welcome to Wednesday webinar series for April. Today we're going to discuss the bin location management features of SAP Business One 9.0 and some of the enhancements that have come in this latest version. The first slide we just have up here is we wanted to make quick reference to our premium training support service. You can find a link to this service on our website at projectline.ca and just click on the support link at the top of the page, and this will steer you towards this website. This particular site is truly just meant as a supplement to all of the great resources that are already out there, but over 275 quick reference videos on Business One can be an excellent tool to kind of handle just gaps in your knowledge and turnover in your organization. All right, so today we will be looking at the inventory advances, bin and location management with SAP Business One 9.0. This will be part one of this webinar. In part two, next month in May, we'll be discussing how the new functionality affects cycle counting within Business One. So today we're going to take a look at how we set it up, how we kind of enable the system to accept bin locations. We're going to see using bin locations in procurement and then using them in fulfillment. So this is kind of a high-level schematic of what's possible now. Most of you are likely familiar with the concept that you can create as many warehouses as you like within Business One. Those warehouses can be defined as having a location and whatnot. And these warehouses could even be virtual warehouses, like if, say, for instance, you were wanting to maintain a warehouse for each truck in your service fleet. If every one of your trucks had inventory on it and you regarded it as a warehouse, you may set it up as a separate warehouse. In the past, in order to, allocate inventory within a warehouse, what we've often coached clients to do is to set up virtual warehouses within the main warehouse. In the SAP 9.0 bin location management functionality, you're now able to specify levels of your warehouse. So, major zones, areas, rows, and bins within those rows. And this schematic kind of shows you a template of a conceptual warehouse setup. This is by no means exactly how you describe the areas in your warehouse. This is more of a general scheme on how certain industries would set up location management within their warehouse. So you may not call them zones, you may not call them areas, you may not call them rows. This will often zones will roughly translate to major pieces of your warehouse. So, the inbound receiving area, the outbound area, the general storage area, the cold storage, that sort of thing will often describe a zone. Areas will be, of course, sub areas within the zone, and then rows are often used to describe racking or whatever storage structure you have within your warehouse. And then within those storage structures, let's say those are racks, these individual bins will be just the single spots throughout your warehouse. In our particular example today, here's our sample warehouse. So we're looking at this conceptual warehouse 44, number 44, our Western Distribution Hub. And you can see within this hub, we've got a few zones. We've got this Zone 1, our receiving zone. We've got Zone 2, which is our general inventory zone. We've got Zone 3, which is our outbound zone. And we've got Zone 10, which is an allocated zone. So we can decide how we name these zones. They don't just have to be the terminology or the codes that SAP Business One would suggest as standard. You actually define these. Within our Zone 2, we also have a number of rows, a number of pallet racks that we've set up. So we've got 5 racks in our main zone, and on each one of these racks, so that's what a pallet rack would look like if you're not familiar. For those of you that have a warehouse, you probably know this style of racking. You can put pallets directly on it, or you can set it up for more individual bins, that sort of thing. And conceptually, if we were just looking at one of these racks in a head-on view, we're saying that there's a bottom level on the floor, there's a mid level on the first shelf, and a top level on the third shelf, or on the second shelf, sorry. And each one of these, I guess, column and level locations, we're calling this an individual bin. So in this rack, we've got 3 columns and 3 shelf locations, low, medium, and high. So that means we've got 9 bins. And if we look at this bin location code, we interpret this to be, this is in warehouse 44, zone 2, which is our general storage zone, rack 1, level 3, because this is the top level, and bin 1. So this is kind of what is behind the codes. If you've kind of never dealt with the codes before, they can be a little daunting to look at just from a list view. Okay, so let's look at setups. We're going to look at how we set up kind of the major warehouse sublevels and define the sublevel lists in Business One, and then set up the actual individual bin codes. Okay, so if we just open up our, if we just open up our, our Business One system. So we've got SAP Business One 9.0 up and running here. You notice that we've got the new skin, the golden thread skin happening for us, and 882 was kind of that blue skin before it. So if we drill down into administration, we're looking to go into admin and setup, inventory, and you'll notice that there's a new folder called bin locations here. So we're going to kind of take a look at the setup behind the bin location. So if we go into bin location field activation, here's where we set up our major warehouse sublevels. So the first tab, warehouse sublevels, and you have the ability to go 4 sublevels deep with the functionality. So in this case, we've called sublevel 1 a zone, sublevel 2 a row, level 3 is a level or a shelf, we could call it even, and level 4 is a bin. These sublevels are all within whatever warehouse we're defining. So in our example, we're doing this within warehouse 44, but these are in general the zones that you have in any of your warehouses. So this is where we set it up. And then if we're using bin location management, we need at least 1 level active, because why would you be using bin location management if you didn't have at least 1 sublevel? And then you can have as many sublevels as you like. So if you didn't require the full 4 sublevels, you could switch some of these sublevels off at this point. So we've got them all activated at this point. The other thing we can do with bin locations is we can actually set an attribute for bin location. What an attribute is it's kind of a something that's special or unique about the bin. And so we've actually specified a bin attribute as a pick location, or even as cold storage. So if there's something unique about that particular bin in your warehouse that needs to be flagged, this is where we would set up these attributes. Okay, and because we've made changes to this form, we'll just click Update and click OK. All right, so now that we've defined our major sub-level types like zone, area, row, bin, what have you, then we want to drill down into the warehouse sub-level code. So we'll open this up. Okay. Now we've defined those sublevels as zone, row, level, and bin. And in this particular case, what we're wanting to do now is we want to actually define all of the zones within warehouse. Within our warehouse. So in this particular case, we're defining these zones for warehouse 44, but this zone structure can apply to all warehouses. So that's the thing that's a little bit tricky here. You're really setting up zone structure for any and all warehouses. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is the Western Distribution Hub may have a zone 1, an inbound zone, may have a zone 2, a general zone, and a zone 3, an outbound zone. But maybe another warehouse doesn't have an allocated inventory zone. That doesn't mean we don't set it up here. It means that later we just don't include it in that particular warehouse setup. So we can see we've defined 4 zones here. We've defined 5 rows. So one of the zones in our warehouse has all 5 rows. One of the zones only has 2 rows, but we need to set up codes for 5 rows. We have 3 levels on our racking, and that really doesn't change. If we put that racking up, we've got 2 shelves in the racking, so we've got floor, middle, and top. And then we're just assuming that all of our racking has 3 columns in it. So we've just set up 3 bin sublevels. Okay. As we scrolled through these different warehouse sublevels and set up the individual codes, you'll notice that on the right-hand side here, there's a little bit of information on how many bin locations actually correspond to these particular zones and what have you. So if we were to drill down here, we would actually see all of the bin locations in zone 2. We're not going to do it here because we want to get into what it looks like kind of more from the warehouse management area. Okay, so now we've set up our major sub-levels in our warehouse, and we've even indicated how many zones, how many rows, etc. So before we get into actually setting up the bin codes, I want to really quickly actually show you something that would need to be set up if a warehouse has been managed. So we've set up the infrastructure, the sub-levels and the sub-level codes in our warehouses. Now what we want to do is we want to make sure that our warehouse that we're setting these things up for is actually managed by bin locations. So this warehouse window, you likely have recognized it before working with Business One. Here's where we set up the attributes of the warehouse. And you'll notice there's an extra flag here that says enable bin locations. This has to be switched on in order to use bin location management in that warehouse. So if we scroll through our list of warehouses, if we go back one, we can see we've got a warehouse number 7. Let's just go back another couple. So warehouse number 4 is our consignment warehouse, and you'll notice that bin location management is switched off. We do not manage that particular warehouse on the basis of bin locations. Okay, we go back forward to our example warehouse, warehouse 44. We've enabled bin location management, and you can see that there's another tab here, and here's where some of the basic data with respect to bin location management can be found. We're not going to you can see that there's it'll report on the number of bins that are set up in the warehouse. So we've already set these up. That's why it's showing. And there's always a system bin location, like one default bin location given to a warehouse when you set this system up. This default bin location could be changed. It's just that when we first initiated Business One and turned on bin location management, it auto created this thing called system bin location, just as a placeholder. Okay. We won't get into some of these other things for now. All right, so now that we have the kind of the core set up, the backbone set up, now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the inventory module. And you'll notice now that bin location is enabled, there's an extra folder in inventory module called bin locations. So we're going to crack that open. And we're going to go into the bin location master data screen. So just like there's a master data record for inventory items and business partners and whatnot, there's actually also a master data record for every individual bin location in the system. And if we go forward to the first bin location, here's that placeholder default bin location that SAP Business One creates by default when you enable bin locations. Okay, if we go even further ahead, we can see that we have a bin location that's been created automatically. So how do we create those bin locations? If we're in the bin location master data screen, we can go to this button at the bottom right hand corner called manage bin locations. Okay, and here's where this is essentially kind of the wizard or the easy way to set up all of these bin codes, because there's 60 some odd individual bins within our warehouse. We want a tool to be able to kind of easily create these in our warehouse. So if we're looking to generate all of the codes, we're going to select warehouse 44, which is our Western Distribution Hub warehouse. Our warehouse 44 has zones 1 through zone 10. So there actually isn't a zone 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We've just named that zone 10 because that is our fancy. So we will go ahead there. So we've got zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, and zone 10 is what we're, actually let's go back one. Let's create the bin locations just for zone 2 because zone 2 actually has a different physical setup than the other zones. Zone 2 has 5 rows of racking and the rest of the zones don't have that. So let's just select zone 2 and generate bin codes for that zone. So in zone 2 we have rack 1 or row 1 through rack 5. So you can see why we wouldn't want to do this for the other zones because the other zones don't have rack 1 through 5. You know, zone 10 only has rack 1 and rack 2. In all of our zones we have 3 levels. So in zone 2 we've got 2 shelves, so top or bottom, middle, top, and we've got 3 columns on each rack. So we're just going to select bin 1 through 3. Okay, so this is kind of the auto generate. This is what drives the auto generation sequence when we set up those bin locations. We can also specify things that are, unique to these bin locations. If we weren't generating, if we were generating barcodes for bin locations, we could actually generate those barcodes here. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but this is very similar to generating barcodes or serial numbers for items. So there's an automatic code generator system. So you could generate these barcodes for each of those bins, and then if you had a printer, either a fancy label printer or just a printer that like you'd set up a template to kind of print out the barcode font. You could actually print out barcodes and stick them to those bin locations and be able to scan them. Are there any item restrictions in these bins? Do we have batch restrictions, certain transaction restrictions? These are advanced features, and I'd probably encourage you just to kind of try out this basic demo first and then get into these advanced features later. You can see that we've got a couple of attributes down here. Though that pick location attribute and that cold storage attribute, that now shows up in the bin data. So we're basically telling the system in these top parameters that we want to generate these bin locations. So if I click OK, what I'm going to get is I'm going to get a report, and the report's going to be all in red. And the reason it's in red is that we've actually generated these bin locations already. So in zone 2, if we consider that there's 5 rows of racking, and each rack has 9 bins in it because it's got 3 levels and 3 columns, that's going to be a total of 45 individual bin locations. And you can see that it's recommending 45 individual bin codes here. So if I were to press generate, it would regenerate these codes all over again, or I'd probably get an error. I'm just going to back out of this. But if we were doing this for the first time, these would be in black, and you'd click generate, and then it would generate all of these bin codes. So let's just back up. If we scroll through these bin codes, we can see here's warehouse 44, zone 2, row 1, level 1, bin 2. And if we go ahead, we can see that we're scrolling through the bin locations in that warehouse. Each individual bin has its own bin master data record, and you can actually specify uniquenesses about each individual bin. Are there batch restrictions? Are there item restrictions? Is this bin used for only storing these bolts? Or can this bin only fit pallets and not individual pieces? That type of thing. Okay. So that's what's behind setup of our bin locations. All right, so now we want to kind of take a look at how this all affects the procurement process. How does this kind of affect things when I'm buying things and then putting them away? So let's go into our, let's take a look at a purchase order that's already on the system. So we're going to go to the last purchase order in sequence. Well, we're actually not going to do that. We're going to go a little farther back to this one, copier paper. Okay. So this particular purchase order, 289, was created on the system. And when we created the purchase order for this copier paper, we put 500 on our. You notice that this purchase order is closed. It's because we've already kind of done the receiving. We've already run this scenario. So I'm just going to kind of show you how this works posthumously. We created the purchase order and we specified that it was coming into warehouse 44. We don't necessarily have to specify a bin location at this point because this is really just the purchase order cutting the PO. Later, once we've gone ahead to the goods receipt, and because the goods receipt's already been generated, we can use the target document button to call up the goods receipt. And you can see that this goods receipt is created but still open. You know, we haven't actually closed it with an AP invoice yet. So when we opened the goods receipt and we copied the information forward from the PO, we copied forward this line, you know, copier paper, quantity 500, and we had specified warehouse 44, and then it had asked us for a bin location allocation. And when we had done that, we can drill down and we can see that we had allocated a certain bin for it to flow into. And if we back up here, okay, so we had allocated it to a certain bin when it came in on a goods receipt. This is normally the inventory posting list that you see in front of you. And if we go into form settings and make visible bin location, we can actually also audit, see which bin location that copier paper was put into. In this case, it was put into warehouse 44, zone 1, row 1, level 1, batch 1. This is the one bin location for our inbound receiving zone, zone 1. So we don't actually have racks for pallets and whatnot in that zone, but we do have to have a bin code so that things can be received into a bin for that area. So that inbound zone just has one bin code if we're all on the same page here. Okay. So we specified this bin code when we did the receiving. And when you do the receiving, you could receive into an inbound zone. You can receive right to the shelf. It's really up to you. It's really dependent on how you run your processes. In this case, we just received all 500 of the copier paper packages into the inbound zone because we have a procedure where things are received into the inbound zone first, and they're inspected to make sure the quantities are there and that the goods aren't damaged, and then they're transferred to the shelf. Okay. So that's how our goods receipt PO are affected. There's a secondary thing that needs to be selected now. Or there's an extra step in this, or an extra thing that needs to be selected in the sense that you want to specify where you're putting this away. And this selection for receiving can be defaulted to a certain bin. If we open up the item master record for our copier paper and go to the inventory tab, we're just going to scroll down to warehouse 44. We can see that the first bin location for warehouse 44, okay, we've got a first bin location, which means that's the first bin that it's physically actually found in. But you can see there's also this default bin location. So this is what's going to be entered into documents as per default when we're, say, cutting a new goods receipt PO. If this was the only bin that we could be using for that particular item, we'd actually check this flag, which is to enforce the default bin location. If we check this flag, however, all transactions around that product will only be able to go in and out of that bin, not transferred to other bins in the warehouse. So we want to leave that off because we actually want to be able to transfer these things to other places. Okay. So we've now kind of seen how we can receive something. And then in our scenario, because we have created a scenario where we have to quarantine things when they hit the dock, instead of receiving them right to the shelf, what we did after the fact is we created an inventory transfer request for that copier paper. So let's just find that request here. Pardon me, it's just a few requests back. So this particular inventory transfer for that paper, this was transferring it from the incoming dock to its location on the shelf. So it's actually from and to the same warehouse. But the from bin location, if we drill down on it, we're saying it's from, you see zone 1, the receiving zone, and it went into the first bin in zone 2. Okay, so here with the inventory posting list, we can see its movement within the warehouse itself. All right, so we just created an internal transfer, like the paper had been received, it had been checked that the quantities were there and it was in good order, and then it was allocated to the shelf. Okay, so that's how how bin location management will begin to affect your logistics process. If we now go into, let's just back out of that. If we now go into inventory and into inventory reports, we see some new reports here, bin location list or the content list. We just click on bin location list, and it'll give us a range of codes that we want to consider. We've just got all codes here, so we're just going to keep this bin location list wide open. Here's a list of all the bin locations within our warehouse. And we can see very quickly, because this report actually shows you which bins are full and which bins are empty, there's a quantity of 800 somethings in that first bin. It happens to be copier paper. If we were to drill down to that bin, we could actually see that through this bin location content list. Okay, so this bin location list, it shows us all of the bin locations in our warehouse. You know, here's the warehouse, here's the zone, here's the row, here's a description on what that bin is. So these are all general storage. There's the one inbound receiving zone. And here's a something in that bin location. And if we click on that golden arrow, we can actually see what those somethings are. Okay. All right, easy as pie. Now on the on the fulfillment side, now we want to kind of see how our fulfillment documents are affected. So if we go to our sales order, and we'll just kind of quickly find our sales order here. Have to back it up a few in order to find the one that we were working on previously. All right, there's our copier paper sales order. So we've had somebody call in, Robert Peterson Wakeman. He's been going through the paper lately, burning trees. So he needs 100 units of copier paper. And we've specified that that sales order needs to come out of our warehouse 44. Okay, so at this point we don't have to pick a bin location. We just have to specify that it comes out of warehouse 44. Let's actually recreate this sales order document. So help a great deal when we're showing how the pick and pack manager works here. So we're just going to give this a unit price of $1 per unit. That's good for our demonstration purposes. Oh, and of course the red bar means user error on Rob's part, as per usual. We just need to put a delivery date, of course, in with that sales order. I'm going to add the sales order into the system. So now we've generated a little bit of demand for that copier paper from warehouse 44. Okay. So if we on the warehouse side, if the inventory manager, the shipping manager is kind of watching things and looking for demand, if you not everybody uses the pick and pack manager, but if you do, this is how bin locations would change your procurement process. And we're just going to get rid of a range here just to make sure that we're picking the right stuff. And we don't need to consider all of our warehouses here, so we're going to deselect most of them, and we're just going to leave warehouse 44 to see what orders have been placed against the Western Distribution Hub. Okay, so in our pick and pack manager, you can see the sales order document that was just created, document number 347. It's for 100 units of copier paper. So logistics manager would say, okay, I want somebody to pick that. I'm going to select that line and I'm going to release it to pick list. The pick list generation wizard, if you've never seen it. So here's how it's a little bit different now. The pick list generation wizard will allow the logistics manager to actually say, you know what, is there a certain area that I want that paper picked from, a pick location or whatnot, we can actually select that right here. So we want that paper pulled from the general zone and then wherever it's available in the general zone. So we'll leave those open. All right, so what we're doing here is we're specifying that that paper needs to be picked from a certain zone or certain bin or what have you. Okay, we're just going to go ahead and generate that pick list. Okay, so we just have one pick to accomplish. This is a simple example. If we go over to the release tab, we can see that this pick list has now been released to the floor. So this is the point at which, if you had an electronic system, those pick documents would go electronically to a handheld, or perhaps you just have this pick ticket here, and what you're doing is you're printing the pick ticket off and handing it to your warehouse person. Sometimes the person that does the back-end management of the picking and the picking itself is the same person. So whatever your process is. So you can see here that this pick list includes the items to be picked and the number and the warehouse that it comes from. And this particular print template does not currently show the bin locations that the pick should happen from. So this is something that would need to be tweaked in our demo system. We would probably want another field here that shows the bin of where you're supposed to be picking this from. Obviously, every warehouse is different, so some warehouses are quite fastidious about indicating where things should come from, but if that's not the case, if you're allowed to pick it from wherever it comes from, then you may not need that. All right, so if we say that this has been picked and we're ready to indicate that it has been, we can either enter the quantity picked if it's different than the quantity that was asked to be picked, or we can just click this button on the bottom right saying pick all. So we've got 100 that were picked as part of that process. And you can see that the bin location from whence it was picked is indicated right here. If that was different, then we would want to change that or update that at this point in time. Yeah, in our example, there is only one bin location that stock is available in, so that's what it's defaulting to. Okay, so we made the pick from that bin location, and we can see now that copier paper has been picked. It's sitting on the dock, it's ready to go. So we select that and we can create a manual delivery on that. Okay, so now we don't really need to know we don't need to really interact any further with bin locations, but you can see in the delivery slip that it is indicating what bin location the stock is coming from. Okay, so that's kind of an additional part of your fulfillment process. Okay, so that's how bins kind of factor into the fulfillment side of things. Right, at that stage, that's pretty much it. We've covered how to set up bin locations. We've covered how to use bin locations in your procurement processes and your fulfillment processes. There are certainly advanced themes in inventory and bin location management. If you have any questions about bin location management, maybe some of the advanced features, I encourage you to reach out to your SAP consultant in order to answer those questions or kind of engage you in any further setup of your system. Thanks so much, and we will see you in May for inventory cycle counting.